Oh, hello. So, this dialogue, one of Plato's dialogues, is a conversation between Socrates and Phaedo. So, I've made a PowerPoint this morning. I don't know how well it turned out, but again, I highly recommend if you want any more of this stuff that you just actually read it yourself. I think that's important, but for us, for our purposes, I just still want to teach. And so I'm going to go through the dialogue, go through what I talked about, which is we're going to ask a question, define words necessary in that question, come up with examples, and then come up with a resolution. So in Phaedo, got to back up a little bit. So Socrates was Plato's teacher. He didn't write any of the dialogues, he's just in them. Plato wrote about him. He was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth, teaching philosophy, essentially. So he's sentenced to death, and he's rather chipper. And so the question becomes, would a true philosopher repine at the moment of death? So we're going to define two words, repine and death. For the dialogue's purposes, repine is just going to be defined as the separation of the body and the soul. Now, the soul, I'm sure, can get into a philosophical conversation, but really how I like to interpret it is the body is just something visible, something we see. The soul is something about us, but it's not seeable. So the bodily pleasures. The examples that Plato brings up are eating and drinking, and indulging in the acquisition of costly raiment, so nice stuff. He brings up some sandals. They must have been fancy sandals. So eating and drinking, indulging in costly raiments, and bodily adornments. And so he talks about the pleasures of the body as, it's nice to have nice stuff. And I'm ad-libbing, if you can forgive me on that. It's nice to have nice stuff. Food is really good. Drinking can be good. But if that's all we are, if we're just living for the pleasures of the body, what happens to our soul? What happens to that essence of us, I guess? And so I think what Plato is bringing up is that essentially, if we're just living for the body, we're kind of the walking dead. We're just like drones. We just go from place to place, from building to building, from class to class. Look at traffic. We just wake up and we're in a hurry to get to places so that we can acquire more stuff, right? And it's nice to have nice stuff. So I think it comes with a balance. It's not like one or the other. You don't have like one, like a body or a soul. we have both. And so living a philosophical life might just create a little different balance. And so he talks a lot about how the body can deceive the soul. For example, stuff tastes good, but it might hurt our health later, right? Drinking might be good, but it might be costly on our bodies later, which hurts our soul. Yeah? And having nice stuff is great, but it's insatiable. It's never going to be enough. If we're lovers of the body, it doesn't matter how much stuff you have. It's going to always be more, right? There's always going to be somebody who's richer, prettier, more athletic, because the search for the bodies, again, you can always have a bigger house, and people are going into debt to have bigger things, a lot of debt, and that hurts the soul, right? So the body is visible, the soul is invisible. I think one thing was really interesting in this dialogue when I reread it again this morning was I didn't pick up on the fact that Plato called the body a he for gender, and the soul a she. And I've never really looked into more of that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So what? Who cares? Since I use most of my analogies with school, I see that. I see students coming in, they sit down, and so many of them, and if it's not you, good, click away. But there's just like an emptiness, like they're a drone, and it's kind of sad. Like they've just like lost their zest and kind of spark, and I can relate to that too. And so I think about, if school were more for the soul, it would always be enough. It'd be just like, your cup's more full, I guess. um, so what feeds your soul? What brings you that joy, that light? Maybe it's stuff. That's okay. I'm not here to tell you how to live. Plato did bring up a contradiction, though. He said, living in a state of death, yet repining when death comes. It's a contradiction. So I think he's just saying, what's the point? If we're not examining our lives, you're essentially dead now. You might have a pulse, you might be breathing, but what are you really doing? What are you really living your life for? And I just think that that's kind of interesting. So he also brings up that there's something worse than death. If we fear death so much, shouldn't we fear the life that we're living not to its fullest, or at least not to the degree that maybe we could? Because are we obsessed with the body over what makes us happy, relationships, things like that? And he says people, especially who regret death at the end, who have lived their life for the body, for the acquisition of more stuff. And he said they're usually a lover of money or power or both. And I can see how relevant this is today. So it'd be different to have a classroom conversation. So I don't know how this is going to go, but keep plugging away.